I'm Lynn.
And I'm Mark.
And we're glad you joined us today.
Welcome to the Digital Marketing Hot Seat Podcast,
where small business owners ask us their number one pain point digital marketing question.
And put us in the hot seat.
Hi, I'm Lynn Smargis, and I'm a content writer specializing in ghostwriting, podcast production, and SEO website content.
And I'm Mark Thackeray, and I specialize in social media marketing, specifically Facebook and Instagram ads, email marketing, and email automation.
I'm ready, Mark. Are you ready?
I sure am. Let's do this.
Hey, fellow small business owners. Welcome back to another episode of the Digital Marketing Hot Seat Podcast. We're so glad you joined us again. And we, okay, let me redo that.
No, you're good. Do you want me to, I can just stop it and start it if you want.
Oh, that's okay. It's easy to edit out the front of the podcast.
Okay.
So. Hey, small business owners. We are so glad you joined us again for another episode of the Digital Marketing Hot Seat Podcast, where you get to listen to small business owners putting Mark and me in the hot seat to answer their digital marketing questions. We also have Digital Marketing 101 episodes, which is what we're going to do for you today. And they are an educational piece that we offer. But before we jump into today's topic, Mark, what client work has your attention this week? What have you been focused on?
So this week we are working on, so one of our clients does training for dogs, and since historically they've done just all their training, locally, where people can come, to their studio and they can train them. But now it's been really neat. We've worked on this for the last year or so, is recording all the videos, all the training sessions, so that they can offer an online course. And so we've been busy doing that, getting that ready, and they're, for their basic obedience, and then they're eventually it'll grow into their advanced obedience and support dog training, and even possibly some detector dog training as well. So it's been really exciting, and we're getting closer and closer. We actually have kind of the beta site launched, so people are in there and testing it, and so far so good. We're making some tweaks and getting it ready so that we can kind of officially launch and scale that across the nation. So yeah, it was pretty exciting time for them. But what about you, Lynn? What have you got going on this week?
So this is actually going to air in March. So by the time this is aired, I would have been finished it. But I am super excited because I just joined the team for the McMinnville the McMinnville Movie Festival. So it's kind of like a Sundance, but they do it in McMinnville, Oregon,
cool.
where I live. And so I'm super excited to do their social media. So
cool.
I'm working with their team to put that together. Who part of their team is actually a gal named Vanessa, who has an advertising agency. So her and I are going to be working together on that. So I'm super excited about, promoting our local town little independent film festival.
It's so fun to be involved in those community events like that. You get to know so many people, and it's just, it's a great cause.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it is that the person who puts it on actually owns a art gallery called 10 Oaks Art Gallery down in in the town that we live in. Yeah. And then he just decided to start putting on this independent film festival. And I think he's only been on for 5 years, I think it was. But he's got this year, he has 110 films that they're showing, but I think they got 700 applicants.
Wow.
So it's growing. This independent film festival is growing fast.
That is so cool. Yeah. That was awesome.
Yeah, I love it because I totally will. It's like a scaled down Sundance. So it will definitely bring people to the area. Yeah, but it's not going to be like when I lived in Park City and you could not drive anywhere during Sundance. Yeah.
I know it's gotten a little crazy up there.
Yeah, that's for sure.
That's cool.
So Mark, I mentioned the Digital Marketing 101 episodes, and you want to give our listeners a little bit of background on what the Digital Marketing 101 episodes are?
Yeah, so these are, a series of episodes to help you learn the basics of digital marketing. So, we work with a lot of business owners, and some have a lot of marketing experience, some do not, and so these are just there to serve as educational material to help you better understand what your options are when it comes to digital marketing. So we'll dive into different components from, your website and content marketing, to social media, to SEO. And we dive into that so that you have a foundation to go off of. And if it makes sense for your business, then you can pursue that more. But these are really just to kind of scratch the surface and give you that underlying information, a knowledge base, really. And so that's kind of what we're doing today. We're finishing up this is the third of a 3-part series on Facebook ads and Facebook ad buys. Our first episode, we talked about paid advertising for your book launch. And then the second one, we zeroed in more on creating your ideal client profile. And then today, we're actually going to take the next step, which was then to use that client profile to select the right audience for your Facebook campaigns. So yeah, excited to kind of wrap this series up. It's one that's very popular. A lot of people are wanting to get on social media and utilize the power of Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, this is what we'll be talking about today.
Yeah. And so since this is Mark's area of expertise, I'm going to do a little bit of putting Mark in the hot seat and asking him some questions. So Mark, to start out, I wanted to ask you, when I know we'll get down to very basic, what is and when you say audience, we're talking about avatars, but not a lot of people are familiar with an avatar or an audience. So when you're saying an audience, what does that basically mean?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, it does mean, I look at it just like that, just an ideal client profile or avatar. Who is that person that you're trying to reach? And I think one of the challenges is that when we get into business, we want to attract as many people as possible, and this is kind of the natural reaction, and I remember this when I was started my photography business right out of college. If someone came up to me and said, "Oh, do you photograph weddings?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I do." Or do you photograph new babies or newborns? I'm like, "Yeah." And then real estate. And I just say yes to everything, right? Just because you want to cast the wide net, right? The thinking is the wider the net, the more fish you'll catch with it. But the reality is a little bit different. You quickly realize that you are not the best fit for all those things, or for all those people. And I soon realized, and going back to my photography example, that I wasn't, super excited to shoot real estate or to shoot stock photography or any of these things. I was very, very selective in what I ended up shooting. And that was mostly just weddings and commercial events. But outside of that, I'd just say no, because I realized it took me more energy and I wasn't really into it. And so I felt a little guilty about giving them, doing that, because I knew it wasn't my best work. And I knew there's probably someone else out there that could do it better. So really it's identifying those people that for whom you're the best fit and that who get you excited to work with, and so that's what I mean. And then when we're talking specifically about Facebook ad buys, audiences take on kind of a slightly different meaning too, because you can have multiple audiences in a campaign that you're targeting. So it could mean an audience that is composed of only your past clients or existing clients, so that you can do a custom audience and just only market to those people. Or it could be an audience that all include a shared interest. So it could be on digital marketing, for example, or it could be on gluten-free, so that's a topic that, people have expressed interest on and, maybe clicked a page or follow a page that's gluten-free specific or a restaurant or something like that. And so you can target that audience, within a certain geographic range. So that could be, the United States, it could be just here in Utah or Washington or a specific zip code. So it takes on a slightly different meaning when you get into purchasing ads on Facebook and actually building out that campaign. But generally speaking, it is the audience that you're trying to reach. And I still tend to come back to that it's your ideal client and who you want to be working with.
Yeah. And I think when you first start a small business, the other thing I realized too, and I started my business, I would like write resumes and found out that I absolutely hate writing resumes, is that it's good to try different things too, because then you figure out what you don't like. Like that's basically like when I was in college and they're like, oh, and the purpose of an internship isn't to figure out what you like, it's to figure out what you don't like to do. And so you figure out what you don't want, and then you can really niche down. So if you're a small business owner and you are casting your net real wide, that's okay to do for a little bit to find out what you like and you don't like, but you don't want to do that for like a really long time, because then, like you said, you're just wasting a lot of your time and energy on things you don't like. And then the other thing I realized is that those things that I didn't like were always like the last client that I would get to. So I would feel really bad because I'm like, oh, I just put them off again because I just wasn't interested in that work. So if you're not interested in it, that's okay. Find your niche and just like own it and run with it. That's like always the best thing to do.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
So, Mark, is there hold on a second. Is there a good, like, if you're a new business owner, what's a good way to find out like more of what you're like? You probably know like basic stuff. So like you might know like your clients are interested in like cats and like white fluffy cats or whatever, but what's a good way for people to find out like what more specifically their clients are interested in?
No, and this is such an important question to ask and to find the answer to, really. And honestly, the thing that I can't overemphasize enough is just talk to your clients. You know, I mean, call them up on the phone, go to lunch with them if you have the ability to do that. Ask them if they're a client that you see regularly, you know, a dentist, for example, that come in every 6 months or for a cleaning. Take the time to really get to know them and ask them questions. Just be interested in their life, in their daily life. You know, what is it, you know, that they're excited about? You know, do they have kids? Where do they live? What do they like to do? All those things will help you fill in the picture of that ideal client, you know, that specific person. So it's just taking the time to ask the questions. You know, and they don't have to be like all related to your business. You know, I mean, just like you said, they could just love white fluffy cats. You know, I mean, they just love a certain magazine, you know, or whatever the case may be. They might be a hunter. They might be, you know, into fishing or something like that. And just you're trying to gather as much data as you can, and then you take that and you look at the commonalities between them. You know, you try and look for patterns. You know, there's a client that had they noticed that they really did well with their best clients were truckers. You know, I mean, they tried marketing to all these different organizations or industries, and lo and behold, they found out that truckers were like the number one return on their investment. And so and that's not like something I would think of off the top of my head. Yeah, I know, right? And so once you identify that, then you can really ramp up that and generate an even better ROI from your ads, you know, or from your efforts. And so it's so, and this is why, you know, I did the last episode on this, just because it's so critical, like it's mission critical to know your clients. But I just think, short answer to your question is just ask, you know, and then take notes and review those notes and add to them as you're going. So, yeah.
And I think that's also good too, just for the relationship building aspect, because you have to have that relationship building with your client in order to really like, you know, retain and keep them for a long period of time. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. Well, I think they reciprocate with that too. You know, they see that, oh man, they really do care about me. You know, I mean, they're concerned about me, and it just shows a lot of respect, and it shows the gratitude too, you know, that you would take the time to reach out to them and see how they're doing, and that you value their input.
Yes. Yeah. Showing that you care for somebody is like the biggest thing you can do for relationship building, especially for client retention too.
Yeah. 100%.
All right. So we're going to get into the last half of our show. But before we jump into the last half of our show, Mark and I would love you to subscribe to the Digital Marketing Hot Seat podcast on your favorite podcast player, or favorite it as they now do on podcast players. And we also have a video component if you like to watch a video of our podcast. You can find myself at Right For You Content Creation on YouTube, and you can find videos on Mark's Facebook channel at Mark Thackeray Group. As always, the links mentioned are going to be in the show notes underneath the album cover. So scroll underneath there and you can click on any of the links that you need to find.
Do you need more people visiting your website? Are you looking for higher ranking on Google searches? Or are you frustrated by the ever-changing rules of social media?
Mark and I are here to take away the headaches and stress of digital marketing with services such as website content, social media ads, and website SEO. We can provide the digital marketing magic you need to increase the number of people seeing your website and clicking on your business links.
Visit our website at www.digitalmarketinghotseat.com and hit us up on our contact page to reserve your complimentary consult. Find out how our marketing team can take the worry and hassle of digital marketing off of your plate and onto ours.
All right, so we're back, and Mark talked about the first half, like figuring out who your ideal client is, coming back to that client profile and really knowing their interests to target your client, the client that you really want to target, and figuring out who that client is, what they like, what their interests are. So now in the second half, Mark's going to start talking about formalizing a campaign versus a boosted post. So when you talk about a campaign, Mark, let's start at just the basic. Like I'm guessing you're talking about like when I go on Facebook and I see like this ad on the sidebar and people are advertising for their product or service. I'm assuming that's what we're talking about when we're talking about campaigns.
Yeah. So you'll see it's always indicated. So I'm just going to pull it up right now just to make sure, but it usually says sponsored at the top so that it's clearly identifiable as an ad, and so people know and are tricked into that. It's funny how we got to this point where I have to be told it's an advertisement,
right? And then on Google, you'll actually see, like when you Google search something, if it's an ad, it'll say ad next to it. And if you click on the one that says ad, it actually costs that person money. So if it's a site that I know I just want to go to and I'm not looking for like to buy something, I'll scroll down to see if they have a link that doesn't say ad.
Yeah. So it usually just says on Facebook, it's sponsored. So yeah, you'll see sponsored or ad, something like that to indicate that that's what it is. But that's what we're talking about, and there's really two main ways to do that. There's we'll call it a formalized campaign, like you mentioned, or it could just be a boosted post, and that's the easiest way. If you're posting on your Facebook page, and then after the post, you're looking at the comments and it says, oh, you can reach 5,000 more people by boosting this post for $5 or whatever the case may be. That's the kind of elementary way to do that. And Facebook introduced that as a way to get people kind of ease that transition and just make it super simple way to get started. There's pros and cons to both. I think when you look at for someone who has been in ads for a long time, there's very rarely would I use a boosted post just because it limits what I can do in terms of my objectives, my campaign objectives, the people I can reach, and just even the targeting. We're talking about this, reaching the right audience. And so those are kind of the main reasons why I stick with a formalized campaign. Yeah, the boosted post is easy. It's relatively inexpensive, but if it's not producing any results, then it's really expensive, right? No matter the cost, because it's
right.
Not working.
It's throwing your money down the toilet, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so I like, looking at, because it's all about it's all about the topic we're talking about is reaching that right audience. And so when you get into a formalized campaign, now you can look at layering sort of these interests or geographic boundaries and things like that, so that you are reaching really the audience that you want to be in front of the most. And so that's where it comes in. You got to know your audience. You got to know what they like, what they dislike sometimes, and so you can start plugging in some of those interests. Now, Facebook doesn't have, you can't choose every single interest out there. Like, they're very generic ones, but when you do it right, if you do know the patterns of your clients, then you can actually be quite specific.
And so let me stop you right there. How would you know the patterns of your client? And then how much audience do you want to work with? Because I know in social media, I always tell people you want to niche down your hashtags so you're not casting your net too wide on social media. But for Facebook ads, it's different.
Yeah. So I think it's going back through the data you see, and just seeing, like, you'll look at So you're going to look at gender, you're going to look at age, like, so those are kind of the starting point ones that you'll obviously make note of, that are easy to gather. The data is easy to gather. But then when you start getting into interests, you start getting into other, sometimes relationship status. Like when I was doing my photography business and I was shooting weddings, like I was targeting people that were recently engaged. I mean, that was a huge identifier for me that eliminated a lot of people that I could have been advertising to that would have no need for what I did, and so that narrowed it down tremendously. And then I added, I layered in different things like, okay, the geographic location, and then the age, and then I just would primarily focus on women because that was easier and a better ROI, and then just some other interests too, like working professional, or the things that I found resonated the most with my clients, or that pattern we were talking about before. So it starts kind of with the basic ones, the gender, the age, geographic location, but then it dives into deeper, from interests to hobbies and passions and things like that. So
so as far as numbers, like, how much of an audience do you want, as far as like when you're targeting people, how many people do you want to advertise to, and how do you test like different variations to see what works?
Yeah, good question. So I think in an ideal world, you want to give Facebook and Instagram as much audience as you can. And I'll say that with a caveat. I think typically if you're going nationwide, you're probably going to have an easier chance to do this, but I like to stay within like the 500,000 range up to 1.5 million. I found that that's worked the best. If it's a huge audience, then it's going to take longer for Facebook's algorithm to kind of work its magic. I mean, this is one of the reasons why it's so big, is that their algorithm has just evolved to be this very, very powerful tool to reach the right people. And so you have to give it enough data to work with. But that said, can you still do this when you only have an audience of 40,000 or 50,000? Absolutely. I mean, you can still do that. You might change, and some of those things will affect how much money you're spending, or your budget, or how often you're advertising. Because if it's a smaller audience, you probably won't need as much budget to reach all those people, several times. And so a larger audience, obviously, you typically spend more money doing that. But I like to stay ideally within, around that 500,000 to 1.5 million people in your audience, ideally.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then how will you figure out, like, when you get, I'm assuming that you're getting data back, because I have never done ad buys. When you get the data back, does it like specifically tell you what types of people are clicking on your ads?
It does. You can break it down. You can do some of the data analysis that way. So you're looking at, okay, you can break it down in terms of media channel. You can break it down in terms of, the actual device, so is it, maybe they're more Apple, maybe they're more Android, maybe it's more tablet, maybe it's more desktop. Most of the time it's going to be cell phones, it's going to be mobile is primary, but you'll see different things. Like one of my clients that does real estate training, they see, the best ROI comes on desktop, which makes sense because a lot of people will purchase the training and then want to get right into it. And so you're kind of looking for those little details that can then inform your decisions moving forward. Do I want to, because you could advertise exclusively to people on desktop, and just exclude people on mobile. And so you can break it down by device and by age and by area and certain interest as well. So you can start to see that data. And that's the cool thing about this too, is that you're going to start to look at that data, and that will help you see the clear picture. It doesn't say, doesn't tell you everything, right? It never will tell you the full story, but it does give you clues and points you in the right direction. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that people will make with this is that they'll do a campaign and they've never done anything like this before. And so they're trying it out for the first time and just hoping and praying that it's going to work. And that's kind of a scary position to be in. If you're banking on this working and you can't afford not to lose the money, then I would recommend not doing it. If you're okay losing the money, just in the case that happens, because you have to figure out the sweet spot in terms of your messaging and your audience. And that's going to take typically a couple of months. I usually say like 90 days.
Yeah.
And you're just testing this whole time. It's really just kind of a lab experiment where you're testing different variables, such as your headline or your copy or your image or using a video or your offer, and you're just trying to see what's that magic formula that's going to get people to click, and this whole time you're going to be analyzing the data and seeing, okay, well, and this happens a lot where we'll get, even a campaign for me and run my business, like it just recently is, it's looking really strong. And I didn't see the ROI I was hoping to, but when I dove into the data, I saw that, okay, these are generating a really strong click-through rate, a high click-through rate, meaning the audience that I'm targeting, this is relevant to that audience. They're clicking through to the ad, to the landing page. And so, but they weren't converting at the rate that I hoped. And so now I'm looking at, okay, what does that mean? That could mean that the message on the landing page isn't quite correct. It could mean that the offer maybe isn't tightened up or isn't as relevant as I thought it was. And so then you start kind of getting into that phase of the experimentation where you're looking even down the road in the series of steps to conversion. And so, yeah, it's kind of a lot there. I didn't mean to spew all that out, but